I grew up in the suburb of Paris, and I got into the passion of skateboarding when I was 15 years old. And from there I went from the suburb to Paris to meet some other skateboarders to start traveling around Europe. And I had a dream to go to California to skateboard because I always see in magazine the palm trees, the perfect concrete, the perfect blue sky. And I always wanted to do this. And when I was 22 years old, I made enough money to pay a trip ticket to go to California. And I ended up in Venice Beach. But I didn't have too much money, so I actually bought a car for almost nothing, and I lived in a car for 6 months and started skateboarding in Venice Beach. And pretty soon I got found by companies that want to sponsor me, and they sent me to skateboard contest. And I started winning a bunch of pro skateboard contests, and I became a world champion skateboarder. And from there, I started traveling the world with my sponsors. And at some point, I was having so many problems with shoes that I decided to start designing shoes. So I went to Korea, and I met some manufacturers that were making shoes. I started making some samples, and I started designing shoes, and it didn't work out. For 5 years, I couldn't get the business to start or to work. But finally, after 5 years, it took off, and that's where I am today. I'm making shoes and sponsoring now the kids that used to be me. And giving it back to them in a way like I wish I could have it. Soul Technology, it's a company that is there to inspire our youth, basically, through a passionate commitment to authentic action sport brand. So basically the idea is to help youth to enjoy action sport and to provide them with footwear and clothing that they can really enjoy. So it's designed basically by people that ride. So at the beginning, it was me, designing all the shoes and the clothing, and then finally I brought other riders or other skateboarders or snowboarders or surfers that was into action sport to design the product. So the fundamental goal of it is actually to create this platform for the kids so they can really enjoy all the sports as much as they can. Not really, but yes, at the same time. When I grew up in Paris, I went to University of Technology, and I was really interested with making different type of product. And then I started working for IBM as an engineer. But the suit and the tie didn't really fit me. So as soon as I had enough money to pay myself a ticket to go to California, that's what I did. But when I started skateboarding and became a professional skateboarder, I totally forget about being an engineer or what I studied before. But then when I started having problems with my shoes, I started trying to figure out how to make them better. And I started using my engineering background, basically how to make the shoes last longer, how to make the shoes absorbing more the impact. And also because of growing up in Paris, I always had a feel for fashion. So I always want to make the shoes look cool, or good at the same time. So it came from all those aspects. But when I started the business, I'd never been to business school, so I had no idea what I was doing. And so I set up a business. I bought a phone, plug it in the wall, and I started calling skate shops and asking them if they would be interested with some of the shoes I was designing. And at that time, of course, they knew me because I was in magazines, but they didn't believe that I could make of my design a business. And at that time, I was telling people I really think the shoes are not done the right way. I mean, all those shoes that people are using for skateboarding are not designed for skateboarding. And because I'm the first skateboarder designing shoes, I can't really make the one that will really work, that will really perform. And they were not so sure about my ideas. They were really wondering, but I continue, doing it with commitment and perseverance. And eventually they realized, that my shoes actually were the first performance skate shoes that were actually working much better than any other shoes. And some of the elements that was essential was the shoes will last 4 or 5 times longer than a regular pair of shoes. So I used some rubber that came from Indy Goodyear called an Indigoodyear rubber they use in the F1 racing cars, for example. So the tires are grip very good, but also they last a long time. Also, I invented some system that actually protect the shoes from the grip tapes for the upper of the shoes, so it lasts longer too. And also, I made the shoes very flexible, so you could feel the board very well. So there was a lot of like innovation. But when I started, yeah, people didn't think I was going to work, because I was talking about performance skateboard shoes like it's never been done before. They never heard that before, and they see this professional skateboarder that skate good, but doesn't seem to have a business sense. And on top of it, I had an extra disadvantage. I didn't speak English very good. So the whole combination was very difficult, but I felt that there was definitely a need for doing something that was needed by all the skaters like me. Yeah, it was very difficult because first, I mean, I had some money that I saved through the competition I've been winning as a professional skateboarder. And then I tried to figure out how I'm going to get money. I mean, I can't go to a bank because they're going to see this guy that immigrated from France that doesn't speak, English very good. It's never going to fly, So I actually borrowed money for friends in France, and finally paid them back after a few years. It was pretty painful years to pay them back, but it's how I started, basically borrowing money from friends and then make them feel that they can believe in my ideas. Yeah, there's a different stage. I mean, for me, from all the stage I had to go through, I mean, first it was creating a brand, creating a product that was going to function. But also I started at the beginning of a recession. So that was the worst time actually to start it. I started like at the end of the 80s, and there was a big recession in the United States. So a lot of the stores were closed, so that was definitely not a good time to start it. So I got the first 5 years was kind of a survival time where I was going paycheck to paycheck, to survive through this business entity. To suddenly in 1994, the business like took off, and it took off to just such a huge dimension that I was not even sure if I wanted to do it anymore, because suddenly I had to go from designing product and creating a lot of things, and to suddenly I had to manage people, because before I had to manage just myself, and suddenly I had to manage people, and then manage people. I've never been really good at managing people, so I was like really not sure if I could do it, but I realized that I would have to do it and continue to do it if I really want to change, the face of skateboarding. If I really want to give this platform for kids, I had to do it myself, versus to bring other people, in a company that doesn't really know necessarily skateboarding, and I can do it the right way. I think the company advantage for my company is probably a lot of the people that are in the company, and I think it's by who I've been hiring through the years. So people that actually came from the skateboard culture or action sport culture, but also it's more than that. It's also a combination of people I've been bringing from also a more experienced type of company, some of the biggest footwear company, and one of the competitive advantage was I call it this almost like an art, how to mix the two sides, the corporate world and also the cultural action sport world, and be able to make it work together. Another thing too, I think, is like a competitive advantage I have is that I started the company, myself, over 20 years ago, and I came from skateboarding, making skateboard shoes. I was a world champion, so very authentic, with what I was doing. I had a engineering background, so that helped me really to build, the best skateboard shoes possible. And at the same time, I think it's like coming to the United States from Europe, I think it was a big help, because suddenly I realized there's definitely a different culture being in the United States than being in Europe. So I realized right away that maybe one of my advantages was being in the US and versus all my competitors that were actually company from the US originally that didn't grow up in a different country. So suddenly I could identify, there was a different way of doing business with other people and how to listen to how they do things, and you just have to be very adaptable or to adapt, you know, to those different way of communicating. Yeah, some of the different culture there is. I mean, it's kind of funny because like if you think about Europe, for example, to me, I've seen the south of Europe is a much more Latin culture. So it's a lot by feeling, you know. It's a lot of more like emotion. People are doing things, and you go to the north of Europe, it's much more organized. It's much more corporate in a sense. It's kind of funny. It's kind of two different ways to do things. I mean, one is much more structured. The other one is much more kind of curving. So you have to, when you do business with people or you interact with people, you have to adapt, you know, to those different type of situation or communication skill. And I think when it comes to the US, you have a little bit of the best of the two worlds. You know, you have a very structured management in the United States, but at the same time, people have a lot of feeling too. So it's a very good mix of the two. For my company, it's always been about the youth, about the kids, and about supporting them. So if it is like motivate them to go skateboarding or snowboarding or surfing, and give them the best product they can use, you know, so they can have the best ability to do the tricks. But also I realized that the support was not just only making the product, was everything around it, you know. So if there's an event to inspire them to ride, but also I realized, you know, like I was manufacturing a lot of product that was creating a lot of pollution, and in a sense I was thinking that's like kind of a negative to what I'm trying to promote. And 10 years ago I realized I had to do something, change things around. So I decided to see my manufacturer in China and figure out how we can reduce the carbon footprint of the company, so we will create less CO2 and then we create less global warming. Going through this process, I realized they didn't know too much about it. And going also to a lot of environmental conference, I realized there's a lot of people talking, and there's not too many people doing something. So I realized I had to, you know, push this issue because I thought it was extremely important. When you go snowboarding, you need to have snow in the mountain. I mean, it's clear. So if it's warming up, it's going to have less snow. If you go surfing, you need to have clear water. It's also clear. It's much more enjoyable. And also when you skate, when you're in the city, it's good when you have fresh air. I remember a lot when I was skateboarding in Paris back 30 years ago that sometimes I was proud of breathing just skateboarding. So I figured this is an element, an important element of the action sport industry, and in particular skateboarding, that we need to actually lower our footprint. So some of the things I've done is I've tried to get the message through my company first, because I believe that's where I can touch people faster. And through this, I built actually an environmental building first to show kind of like a piece of something that works. So a building that works on solar energy, a building that has recycling wood, recycling limestone, a lot of windows, you know, and also to get people to see it's possible to do actually really cool stuff, you know, that actually are green and really are looking forward. As I was doing this, I realized, okay, this is good, but I really need to get people participating in this process. So I decided to create a group called the Blue Bean Brigade. So that would be a brigade, like a group of people that will be meeting on a monthly basis, and there will be a person from each department representing the environment, and they will have for goal to come with ideas how to reduce the footprint. So to reduce the CO2, or reduce, for example, the use of paper or water or anything, you know, they could do, and it comes some ideas they bring to me, and then we'll put them into execution. And as I was doing this, I was thinking, well, this is good, and then we can do also the product that more green. So we start removing the petroleum from the glue in the shoes. We start doing all the packaging and recycling with the shoes, reusing some of the rubber in the shoes. But I was thinking, this is all good, all this, but in a sense, to reduce our carbon footprint, we need to measure, you know, how much carbon footprints we are doing. So at that point, I figured out, you know, I'm not the best expert in this area. I mean, I'm doing all the things by intuition, but I need to get an expert. So I look for an environmental manager in a company that could be creating a department that will be measuring, you know, our carbon footprint. And finally find this guy 2 years ago. So that was the first actually environmental manager in any company in the action sport industry. And his role was first to measure the CO2 that we were creating and to come up with a plan to reduce. So we took 9 months to go all around the world, visiting all our factory and offices to calculate how much CO2 we're creating, and with a goal to get to zero. And my goal is to eventually to be a carbon neutral company. Carbon neutral company basically means that you don't create any CO2, and that means you reduce the global warming, you know, and that means like the Earth is getting less hot, and we don't have, you know, all this ice, you know, melting, and then also we have better pure water. Also we eliminate all the disappearance of species, and also we give and ultimately it's really so much more about humanity than the planet, because the planet is going to be there no matter what, but we might not be here if the planet gets too hot. We still have time to do something, but we don't have that much time. That's why it's so critical that there's a mobilization happening, and everybody can do something at every level. For me, for example, I mean, I think everybody has a lot of power, more than they think. So at my level, I'm trying to convert the factory, you know, to reduce, you know, the CO2, or my company to reduce the CO2. And when I buy the shoes, is like I'm voting. I'm voting for the environment. I'm saying this is what we're trying to do. You know, we're going in that direction, and you guys need to follow that direction. But every day when I do something in my personal life, something too. If I go to a grocery store, you know, I can buy something more green. In a sense, I'm voting for the economy going that direction, and I will drive the company that direction, but also I will drive the government that direction too, because, you know, obviously you can't exist, you know, without the resources. The etnies project is something we started a few years ago. The idea was actually to create a part of the line on etnies that will be extremely focused on the environment. So we'll use like cotton or hemp or bamboo, and we'll try to really promote the environment, you know, that way. And now the idea is try to do it through the whole line, but there's always a challenge, and the challenge is that people are not necessarily buying environmental all the time because it's more expensive in general. So you have to bring a line that people can afford, and sometimes it's a bit more expensive. But the overall idea, I think, about reducing your footprint and being better for the environment is actually reducing not just on a product, but from on the whole process from A to Z, you know, from how you move your product, you know, to how much paper you use in your company, to how do you come to work, you know. So for example, with Soltech, we push a lot of people to do carpool lane, you know, and then we create like kind of a map where everybody lives, and they can see where somebody else lives in the area. Maybe they can come together and drive together. So it reduces the footprint, and at the same time, you know, it helps them, you know, in their pocketbook, you know, because we know the price of petrol, you know, is higher, and it's not going to stop. It's just going to keep on going higher. The environment is very important, but also we have the human right part of it. So we, you know, all the factory that we work with, they have to follow our book, our code, you know, to join us, you know, on this, which is a pretty basic code that a lot of companies are using generally. And it's one thing is interesting actually about the human rights is a lot of people imagine actually big companies don't follow human rights, but they have to. Because to be able to manufacture with companies that are solid enough, or for those manufacturers to manufacture with big brand, they have to be on those standards. Otherwise, it's too risky, you know, for the business. You know, suddenly if they get bad press, their business could be going down. So they are forced, you know, in a sense. So a lot of companies that are pretty big generally are always, you know, very strong on human rights. Where it's more dangerous, I would say, is like the smaller company. They have the one that have less, you know, pressure and less risk, you know, to go with the human rights. So it's our responsibility. We're looking at the human rights, and we are looking at the environment, and the environment for me is a human right too, in a lot of different ways, you know, because we're creating all this pollution right now, and then what kind of right is it for for the existing humans, but for future humans too. We're creating all this pollution that we don't even realize the consequences yet. I think my biggest challenge, I consider myself more like an entrepreneur or innovator than a businessman. I really don't think I'm a businessman. I think I'm not very good at making deals, but I think I'm good at inventing things. One of the big frustrations when you try to invent things or try to take people a certain direction is that you don't get too many people believing you at the beginning. So it's pretty frustrating because you know in yourself that this is the right direction, but it takes a long time to have people following you. So you have to be very, very patient. And sometimes that patience is wear on yourself. It's not easy. So for example, the environment, I've been talking with my company about this for 10 years. And I really have the feeling that it started taking ground only 2 years ago. So it took me almost 8 years to make it happen. So it's a pretty frustrating process, to go through. But finally, one of the key things that has helped me, getting people to move is actually when I did the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, the 11 Hour, the movie on the environment where people could see finally how it looks like and not just hearing it. And it really helped people to move. But I think so the biggest frustration, I think, for a creative person or innovator, entrepreneur is actually seeing those ideas and how long it takes to put them in places. I manage things more by inspiration than by pushing things. For me, when I was skateboarding in my suburb of Paris, I was teaching myself skateboarding, and then finally when I went to Paris, those people saw the tricks I was doing, and instead of just skateboarding on the side by myself, I always thought it was important to share, what I was learning. So I would teach, the kids, how to skate, and I will teach them, and then I will learn something else. I will teach people, So I thought it was always an important part of life, the sharing part of it. So same thing with my company. I look at my company, I'm creating this platform when I'm creating a job for people. And then those jobs are there for them to have a good life experience. So they come to their life where they spend so much time at work, and this work has to be meaningful. So it's motivating, and you feel at the end of the day you have a good life. So that's how I look at my business. The sales numbers, all the resources that develop is important, but it's not really the most important things for me. The most important is actually is living a good life and leaving the right footprint behind me, and along the way try to create like a connection with people where people feel good about themselves. So my personal goals, is to live a great life, to where I enjoy a lot of creative, outlet, and at the same time be able to share this with people where I flourish their life, and that's basically my main goal. In life, generally, I think there's 3 things that are very important: is you have to have something to do, something to look for, and something to share. And it's very simple, and if you don't share, you will not enjoy life as much. If you don't have something to do, you will not. And if you don't have something to look for, you will not either. So you have to have something to do, something to look for, and something to share. I'm 45 years old, but I feel like I'm 22 and a half times 2. That's the way I feel, and but also I always feel like, you need to stay young, I think that's important, because when you're young, a lot of things change, and in your life you have to be able to change all the time. You never know what's going to hit you, and you have to have that youth. That youth is in a sense, a part of the meaning of being alive. So if you're alive on this planet, you might as well be young, and embrace, all this youth. So, and it's funny because a lot of time people, if you ask about people when they think some of their best time they had in their life is usually when they are teenager, around 16, 18 years old. So they are a grown adult and they live a full life and everything is like looking great, So I don't see why we should not be, keeping this feeling all our life. I like people that actually are wise for giving back, to the community. So Dalai Lama, I admire the Dalai Lama. I think is pretty amazing person. I admire a lot Mikhail Gorbachev also, because he's done something pretty amazing actually. Try to create a better universe or world, for humanity by breaking the wall between Russia and United States. So that's pretty amazing. I mean, knowing the challenge that he had to face, and for a culture that had this for so many years, so pretty amazing. So I think all those type of people that are kind of like trying to create peace and try to create harmony around the world, I definitely admire those type of people. I think I'd say probably to create a platform for youth, where we try to help youth to be inspired by skateboarding and feel that there's people backing them up. It's not just them on their own, but it's actually people who understand why they're doing it and what they're interested of doing it. Also, I think it's like probably be able to come in the United States and barely speaking English and try to figure out what I was going to do and suddenly getting into this adventure, with designing shoes that I never designed before and figure out how to make it work, and finally creating a job for my friends and for their friends, and try to create a platform where they can enjoy life even better and follow their passion and follow their what they are driving by. I would say it's probably some of those things. I think like journeys is probably the things that are the hardest to do, that make you most proud of. The thing that you think it could never happen, that suddenly happened. And I think I've done it. I don't think I've done it necessarily by intention so much. I think I just done it because I just felt in my heart that was like the right things to do. I just felt I was passionate by this, and was feeling this is how I share my love. I share what I have inside of me, and suddenly those doors open and happen. But that's true that a lot of time I think you're proud of something you do that actually is not easy for you to do, or you don't expect that you can do it. The more it takes to do something, by the time you invest into it, the more satisfaction you get somehow. Because you get proud of it and you realize, oh wow, it was difficult, but I got it. That's amazing. So I think all those type of things that actually come to me like challenge, a lot of time I look at it as this might be the biggest opportunity for me to be proud of what I'm doing. Yeah, I think if I knew all, in a sense it's funny too, because if I knew how hard it would have been, to launch a business without knowing nothing about it, I'm not sure if I would have started. I might have done something different, but at the end of the day, I'm happy I did it, because it really helped me discovering a lot of different things. A lot of time, people say ignorance is blessed, and I totally agree with that statement. It's true. If I knew all the stuff that were in front of me, I probably would not have jumped in this footwear industry or this clothing industry. But I think, for the youth today, I think there's a message, is probably just about following your passion and be committed, and just follow what you're really into, and you might not see the end of the tunnel, but eventually it will come. It happened to me, and I'm not the most intelligent or wise person in the world. I just follow my passion, and I just put the effort into it. Yeah, no, it's very strange. I don't. But I think it's like if you're on the innovation side, on the creative side, things come, generally, because suddenly people realize, oh wow, there's those things that exist that I need, and then they embark on what you're doing. If they have a passion and they have the energy to go for it, and they are willing to learn all the time, their dream can really come true. Of course, they have to look at an area there's opportunity, or there's possibly of opportunity in the future. But I think you should follow your art in a lot of different ways, you know, because that's where you can be the most in harmony with yourself, and that's where you can succeed the most overall and have a great life. So I would encourage them to just follow, you know, a direction of things they really love to do, and putting the 200% into it.